All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 2024 University Challenge event. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Eric Hopt, Chair of the NAIOP's University Challenge Committee.
My name is John Noble. I'm part of the NAIOP University Challenge Committee as well. I'm a staff developer here in Minneapolis, and I work for a firm called West Development.
All right. And this is the 21st annual competition. NAIOP is proud to support the event and the college students that are about to enter the industry. After this quick introduction, you'll get to see presentations from the top 3 schools, followed by the announcement of the first, second, and third place.
This year's competition has teams from 5 exceptional universities: Iowa State, Marquette, University of Minnesota, University of St. Thomas, and University of Wisconsin-Madison. Of those 5 schools, the top 3 are presenting to the NAIOP audience this afternoon are Marquette University, University of Minnesota, University of Wisconsin-Madison. Student teams were tasked with coming up with a complete development plan that involves the most profitable yet feasible project while maximizing value and achieving the highest risk-adjusted return. The teams were asked to address a development plan, construction timeline, budget, pro forma, lease plan and schedule, financing plan, and market analysis. The scoring from the judges is based on both the team's written proposals and their presentations.
The site for this year's competition is the Maritex Freight House in downtown St. Paul. For the competition, the teams must purchase the full site and assume the building at 444 Pine Street cannot be torn down. Teams may choose to operate the asset as is, remodel, demolish, or partially demolish the remaining buildings. The site is located in a neighborhood formerly known as Lafayette Park, a residential district for the Twin Cities elite turned industrial center. It's now currently owned by the Maritex companies. The cumulative parcel size for the site is 11.36 acres. Teams will assume a land cost or purchase price of $21,150,000 for the site. And then before we start with the presentations, I'd like to acknowledge everyone who made this competition possible. First, thanks goes to the experts who volunteered their time to answer students' questions over the last few months. Can we give them a round of applause, please? All right, next thank you goes out to the judges who read all the team's proposals and volunteered their time this afternoon to watch and evaluate the presentations. Big round of applause for them. All right, next I'd like to extend my personal thanks to the University Challenge Committee members who have helped put this event together and who have been working behind the scenes to plan this event since last October. If you have interest in joining the committee for next year's event, please reach out to NAIOP staff or me after the event and we'll make sure to get you on the list. Big thank you to them. All right, next, a big thank you to the Maritex companies for letting us use their site as the focus for this year's competition and fielding lots and lots of questions. Thank you. All right, next, we're very grateful to the 42 event sponsors. A tremendous contribution to them. Thank you very much. All right, and last but not least, I want to thank the Opus Foundation for supporting the NAIOP University Challenge year after year. Thank you.
All right, now we'll start with the team presentations. Please welcome to the stage the team from Marquette.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us here today. We are the Marquette University team. I'm Alex.
I'm Richard.
I'm Willie.
And I'm Linda.
And we are thrilled to present you with McNeely Plaza, our vision for the redevelopment of the Maritex Freight House site. McNeely Plaza proposes a destination location that integrates multifamily, senior living, retail, and entertainment elements to create a dynamic and vibrant community hub. We are very excited to go into our proposal in depth as well as the financials to show how we got to our current uses.
So located just outside downtown St. Paul, Maritex Freight House is located in an industrial and office heavily dominated area, with currently there being light foot traffic. In addition, we had some key considerations for our site, with that being the L1 zoning, which would be transitioned to mixed-use zoning under the 2024 or 2040 Comprehensive Plan for St. Paul, as well as the tenant currently occupying the space until 2026 quarter one. So taking a broader look at St. Paul, we notice that there's quite a lot of medical buildings in the area. We also took a look at some of the entertainment options, which includes the Barton as well as the St. Paul Saints baseball team. We then looked at the multifamily and senior living options within the downtown area. And then we did come across one challenge with our site, which is the adult and liquor store adjacent to our site, but we have mitigated that risk with our building positioning and our site planning. So taking that into consideration, we at Blue and Gold have tried to create a new vision for this site, and with that, our vision is to spark economic growth within the area, construct a destination location, and ultimately to be a catalyst for redevelopment in the area.
In determining the highest and best use for our site, we conducted thorough analysis and market research. We initially looked at 3 property types, including hotel, medical office, and office. However, we concluded that these proved to not be financially feasible due to low demand of hotel and market saturation of multi-office and office. Additionally, we explored more options, including data and tech, industrial, and more. Although they may have been financially feasible, they do not align with the city's 2040 comprehensive plan or our vision for the site. Reaffirming our goal to drive continuous foot traffic throughout the site, we found that multifamily and senior living provided the primary base for achieving this. Looking to support these uses, we found retail, food and beverage, and entertainment as the best fit, as they can provide residents and visitors everything that they need to have an enjoyable and convenient lifestyle. Looking at key demographics, the median household income is 24% higher than the national average. Entertainment spending is 11% higher than the national average. Additionally, the area boasts a 3.3 unemployment rate, which is below the national average, indicating a strong job market. Lastly, there will be a 21% increase in the 75-plus population by 2028, signaling a growing demand for senior living options.
So taking a look at our market analysis of the St. Paul metro area, we noticed that there's a trend with downward trending vacancy rates for Class A multifamily, currently sitting at a 6.3% vacancy rate. We also noticed a downward trend for Class A retail, which is currently sitting at a solid 3.9%. And then finally, we at Blue and Gold sent out a survey to St. Paul residents, and one of the key indications from that survey was that the area is currently missing decent options for both shopping and entertainment.
So a major advantage of our site is the close proximity to neighboring amenities and attractions. For example, the St. Paul Saints field is only a few minutes away, with other additional sporting venues all within a 20-minute drive. Other popular leisure offerings like the Farmers Market, Mears Park, and other historical landmarks are all within a 6-minute drive, enhancing the city's lively environment. With St. Paul being just 3 minutes away and Minneapolis 15, there's a wide variety of transportation options such as bus lines, walking and biking, as well as the close proximity to I-94 and I-35 East to allow seamless travel to and from the site.
Now getting into our development overview, the first thing I want to stress here is that all of our buildings have unique names based on the rich heritage and the McNeely family. So now looking at our total project sources and uses, McNeely Plaza as is requires $223 million in total capital to complete the project. We got to this assumption based on various market research as well as inputs from different architecture firms and construction industry experts. So for this project, it'll be financed through traditional equity as well as traditional bank debt, which was provided by Colliers Debt Capital Markets and Waterstone Bank. Another thing to note is the structure of the debt. So we have 5 different debt structures, one acquisition loan, and then a unique debt structure for each use involved in the project, just to accommodate for proper timelines and different assumptions based on the uses. Getting into our total project return, we are currently forecasting a base case of 14.3% return, and that is at a blended 5.3 exit cap rate. I'd also like to point out our strong 8% average stabilized cash on cash. In addition to this base case, we also forecasted an upside and downside case to factor in any market headwinds or tailwinds that we might face along this project timeline. Getting into our first phase of development, we'll see construction of Clover Heights Apartments, which is a 370-unit Class A multifamily space with the primary goal of attracting young professionals that we talked about earlier, capitalizing on those great views of downtown, and really providing a great base level of foot traffic for the site. Also in this phase, we'll begin construction on the Pine Grove Senior Living, which will be a 170-unit assisted living and multifamily facility that will have a communal design, again, just increasing traffic throughout the site. And really the goal of this is to be close to those parents of seniors so they can constantly, go back and forth, but also tapping into that robust healthcare system in the area. Looking at some of our assumptions here, on the multifamily, we are in line with market rents. And another thing I did want to point out is that we do meet the stress test for affordable housing with that 50 and 60% AMI laid out by the City of St. Paul. Moving on to the senior living assumptions, we took a conservative approach on our senior living assumptions, which were provided by a principal at Capital Senior Housing. And one thing I'd also like to note is that there's a lot of other income in the forms of medication fees and community fees that provide strong cash flows for this property. Moving into the returns, the senior living will be comprised of 39% of our total project cost. It's the second highest use of capital, and for that we're projecting a 15% base return. Moving into the multifamily, this will be our most capital intensive use in the project at 47% of overall cost, and for this we're projecting a 14% base return. Phases 2 and 3 come in with construction of the Sioux Line Market, the Crossroads Shopping and Sioux Line Market. This is really meant to be a modular retail and entertainment space with a huge diverse mix of different tenants. And this will just allow for, whatever your preferences are, there's really an option here for everyone. So whether it's, taking your elderly parent in senior home to lunch at a cafe in the McNeely Plaza, or hitting, some golf balls on a cold, Sunday morning in St. Paul, there's really something for everyone. Looking into some of our assumptions here, we do have aggressive yet defendable rents, considering that there isn't a space like this in the St. Paul market. And we also have provided some incentives, and we do expect the revenue that these tenants will receive to be significantly higher than the surrounding area, so making it a very attractive space. Looking into our returns and construction, this will be a smaller part of our project, comprising 11% of our total construction cost, and we are forecasting a 14% base return.
Getting into the final phase of our development is the commencement of the redevelopment of the old office space into our new brewery restaurant community space. This site has dedicated parking and patio space to allow a special community vibe for visitors as well as the current residents. Getting into the assumptions, it's to note that this space will be built to suit the brewery restaurant space with finished kitchen and dining area, as well as the second floor community space ability to be rented out around 100 days of the year. Touching on the returns, the brewery space takes up the least amount of capital at only 3% of our total project development cost and projected returns of 11%.
Now moving into our SWOT, we noticed a lot of strengths on this project, and we previously touched on them. We also identified some potential weaknesses and threats. One of those weaknesses being the low multifamily market rents, but to mitigate that, we decreased our unit size in line with national trends. Also, everyone knows with the high debt costs currently, but to mitigate this, we've looked at options and potential options in the future for refinancing some of our construction debt, and also potential for a partial sale of some of the site to provide an equity infusion. On top of our base forecast, we also identified 3 potential return-enhancing options that could be used by the developer if they choose. First being an energy solution involving geothermal heating, which will reduce hard costs. Second is creation of a TID affordable housing district. We mentioned before that our units do qualify. And then lastly, reducing our stabilized hold period from 7 years to 2 years. With all these factors considered, we're forecasting a 19.5% IRR compared to our base case of 14.3.
We'd like to thank you once again for listening to our development proposal for McNeely Plaza. We believe that this development would not only drive value to our investors, but also to the community of St. Paul as a whole. We'd like to open the floor to any questions or comments, and thank you once again.
I do have a question about your market survey that you did. How did you do that, and how big an audience, or how'd you pull that off?
Of course. So you use 2 different softwares called Qualtrics and Prolific, and essentially you can send out, using Qualtrics, send out a survey to a group of pre-screened individuals so you're getting quality responses. And with that, you can set different demographics as well as a qualifying question to make sure that because anyone can just go through surveys, but having that question confirms that they are from the area. And it's a fairly low-cost way to get really good market data.
Thank you.
With 75,000 feet of retail in your project, what type of tenants were you looking at, and how did you intend to drive traffic to that?
For retail tenants, we were looking, from our survey, we found that most of the residents are looking for more, small boutique stores, whether that's a small core power like fitness center, or a small convenience store like Target, or a smaller version of Target, but also integrating more of restaurants, and a lot of the residents are looking for more of that multicultural restaurant.
On top of that, for our Shoe Line Market, we look to kind of have a different, diverse group of tenants. We kind of based it off, there's a property in Milwaukee called the Milwaukee Public Market that's got some divided market space for different tenants that do a broad range of different boutique shopping as well as restaurants. But we also wanted to include space for activities, so we included a golf simulator, batting cages, which we think would play very well with people coming from the St. Paul Saints games right after they come right to the Shoe Line Market. And then we also added like field games, so like bags or cornhole. I don't know what you guys say, but yeah, that's kind of what our general idea was for both the retail and the market space.
So earlier in the presentation, you mentioned that the studio and the 1-bedroom units met city affordability requirements. Can you expand on that a little bit and how it applies to this project? Because I understood the building to be a market rate building, so how do you think about these affordability windows?
Sorry, I'm just gonna pull up an appendix here for a calculation. So for that, we pitched this project as we essentially pitched it as, here's our base assumptions with no affordable, as a consultant to a developer, and then on that last slide, some of those things that can be implemented in. So this was our calculation for our max rents. So really, those units, what we had from the market comparables, already qualify for those credits, so it'd just be an implementation through a pay-go structure.
Can you talk about how you guys got comfortable adding, significant retail to maybe St. Paul looks kind of downtown not so great with vacancy rates? How you got comfortable with that?
From our comp set of Class A retail, we saw that were pretty strong numbers. In addition to that, I think the survey had a lot of great advice from what residents were really looking for. And one of the biggest things, as we touched upon, was the shopping center, more shopping and entertainment options. And what we're looking for is to kind of take our development and bring foot traffic there. We're gonna have 370 units of multifamily and 170 of senior living, so that's a ton of people already on the site who will be right next door to 6 retail spaces, market spaces. And we're also gonna try to partner with the community, with our community space in our brewery, to try to bring in more people into that space as well. So just trying to bring people into the space was kind of our grand idea, which is kind of why we thought it would be a comfortable assumption.
Yeah, and just one more thing to add. I mean, everyone here knows downtown St. Paul is a really cool area, and there's a lot of things to explore there, but not many people travel into downtown. So we really just needed to build a site, and we had the opportunity to develop on an 11-acre campus. So we can actually create a big enough site that it really kind of draws in on itself. So yeah, just kind of getting people back into downtown St. Paul was one of our goals.
And also taking into consideration of what our visitors and residents will need. So that will obviously include a grocery store for our residents so that they wouldn't have to leave our site. And also, you covered the rest.
I think it's really interesting you guys did a survey to kind of see what the market told you that it wants here. I'm curious how you went about thinking about creating senior housing. Obviously, you had there's some demand for senior housing, but putting senior housing next to a brewery and a bunch of retail and regular market rate apartments. How'd you guys go about the process of thinking about that?
Yeah, well, how we kind of envisioned our project is an all-encompassing kind of campus where we want everyone to be active and moving around. Our senior living, we don't want to have, a senior living development where young people just give their parents up to the senior living the building and then just say goodbye. We want them to, have an input of where is an attractive place to put their parents to live for the rest of their lives. And we wanted to make it seem like this is a place where, the kids will love to come visit their parents. The parents will love visiting, or the parents will love to live there. So we wanted to try to keep it, all-encompassing. And I don't know if anyone else has it, but yeah.
Another question. This is a pretty large, sizable project. Over $200 million. As you looked at, just doing common equity for this, what kind of ideas did you guys come around of the type of equity that would be interested in doing a project like this?
So we kept this project, again, going back to that consulting view, kept that at a project level, just because, presenting this to various developers, they're going to have their own LP-GP split expectations, along with hurdle rates there. But pitching this development to a specific developer, understanding their investor needs, we'd be able to add in addition with what they're looking for out of their splits. And as far as other equity grants, from everything that we researched, we did not find any things that we could make a very determined and for sure assumption that we could actually go out and get that grant. We could have made an assumption, that we possibly can. That was something that we looked into, but we decided to go the more conservative route.
Thank you, guys.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anka Wiersma, and we are Urban Makers North. We are proud to present to you our development plan for Lafayette Square. It's an adaptive reuse of the existing structures on site located on 500 North Pine Street, 355 East 8th Street, and 444 North Pine Street. Our site's proximity to downtown St. Paul, transitways, busways, the Regions Hospital, and the Capitol Building make our uses the brewery and restaurant, a medical manufacturing company, and an event center. Make sure that it activates the site from morning to night. We have identified an LOI for all 3 uses from a BIPOC party. Our Lafayette Square's strength relies on its innovative reuse and critical understanding of the current market conditions. I will pass it along to Maya to discuss our design process.
My name is Maya Sherry. The site plan for Lafayette Square demonstrates our unique objective to preserve the site while accommodating all 3 existing buildings to their updated uses. All parking requirements are fulfilled on the surface, eliminating the need for costly underground parking or a separate parking structure. All 3 buildings will be retrofitted to serve modern needs, and energy-efficient lights and windows will be implemented to ensure longevity for our tenants. The introduction of solar paneling will also reduce energy costs while providing an extra mode of income. All of these features will be implemented so that we can use all 3 existing buildings to their fullest and best potential. I'll pass it back to Anka to dive deeper into our development plan.
Thank you, Maya. We'll start with the building previously known as the Toy House. We're honoring its playful nature, and we're bringing in Ladonia Cerveceria. Ladonia is a thriving local business who will be the sole occupant of the space, with the interior uses being split between restaurant seating and recreational use. The restaurant will then open up to a 1,500 square foot deck to enjoy the beautiful weather. There are a total of 96 parking spots associated with the brewery. Of course, there's room for overflow in the warehouse parking adjacent. Next, we'll go to the 444 North Pine Street. Needs minimal improvements, and we're excited to introduce our tenant, Mayan Event Center. The Mayan Event Center will focus on the beautiful views of downtown St. Paul while also housing its administrative offices for its needs. There are a total of 60 parking spots in the nearest adjacent lot, and with, again, overflow being directed to the warehouse and street parking if needed. Our last building, the existing industrial warehouse, is a blank slate. The precast concrete structure will serve as a perfect spot to bring in our identified client, Manny's Sterilization Company. Manny's Sterilization is a medical manufacturing and assembly company who will reactivate the site to a more productive use. With 274 parking spots associated with it, it will operate during business hours, which will then take on overflow from the Ladonia Brewery and the Mayan Event Center. I'll pass it along to Grace for our market.
Thanks, Anka. My name is Grace Stranick. As we outline the uses of the site, it's also important to pick out the excluded uses that we did not use on this site in our development strategy. Firstly, we acknowledge the demand for affordable and market rate housing. However, we did not implement these due to high construction costs, loan rates, and competition for bonding. Secondly, the negative impacts of COVID-19 has brought down the use of traditional offices as well as big box retail and market and traditional office and market spaces. We use these options to decide on which uses we're going to bring the highest and best use for our site based off of best planning practices and sustainable commitments. Julian.
Thank you, Grace. My name is Julian Carr. Urban Makers North has ensured that a straightforward lease-up process at Lafayette Square by securing LOIs for all 3 buildings on our site. Rents will commence and tenant improvement allowances will be paid out at the end of our landlord construction periods. Our commercial buildings at 444 and 500 North Pine Street will be delivered vacant, allowing us to immediately begin our 6-month construction timelines on their improvements. Our industrial building at 355 East 8th Street will be delivered with a tenant in place. Urban Makers North will immediately execute the existing lease's landlord termination clause, beginning a 6-month lease closeout period, during which we will continue to collect rents at a triple net rate of $6.50 per square foot. After this period is over, we will begin our 8-month construction timeline on its improvements. Now on to Riley.
Thank you, Julian. My name is Riley Johnson. I will be talking to you about the construction schedule as well as the estimating. So begin in November 2024, we will start our construction approval process for the Lafayette Square. Then, beginning in early 2025, we'll be transforming the communal spaces in the Ladonia Brewery as well as the Mayan Event Center into commercial, vibrant spaces. Ladonia Brewery will undergo new HVAC, electrical, as well as a new patio area for community activities. The Mayan Event Center will undergo demolition as well as reconstruction to bring back its vibrant historic charm. When it comes to Manny sterilization, we will be doing a complete retrofit, and we'll have a new HVAC, electrical, as well as be installing solar panels for sustainable energy. Its main focus will be on advancing medical manufacturing. Knowing this and all the changes that can happen in construction, we'll be attaching a 10% contingency. This will allow us to adapt to any changes that will happen in the renovation as well as the retrofit, and let us remain committed to the success and development of the St. Paul area. Now I'll be giving the mic back to Julian.
Thank you, Riley. Conventional loans will make up a sizable portion of Lafayette Square's capital structure. These conventional loans will be debt constrained. We expect an interest rate of around 8% for our construction loan, hopefully decreasing to around 6.5% by the time our project reaches stabilization for a permanent financing loan. On top of traditional equity, Urban Makers North will also utilize novel green financing methods to fill out the rest of our capital structure. Our aim for environmental sustainability led us to identify PACE, or Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing, as a desirable option for our capital stack. PACE will be obtained through a soft loan from the Minnesota Climate Innovation Finance Authority. We expect this loan to carry a desirable interest rate of around 4.25%. PACE will make up around 15% of our capital structure. In addition, we expect in addition to PACE loans, we expect to get novel Inflation Reduction Act tax credits that were part of the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. These tax credits will be talked about more by Grace.
Thanks, Julian. We decided to implement solar panels on all 3 of our buildings. 60% of installation costs will be covered through tax credits. Remaining costs will be covered through PACE financing. We decided to add solar panels because of not only a sustainable source of energy, but an additional source of income as we sell it back to Excel Energy.
Thanks, Grace. Urban Makers North plans to retain ownership of Lafayette Square for 7 years. This timeline will allow us to maximize our return on tax credits while also maintaining a stable internal rate of return of nearly 20%. At sale, we expect sale price at around $75 million. This will reflect a sale cap rate of around 6% and cash-on-cash returns of almost 8%. Thank you, and here is Maya.
We'd like to take a moment to thank you guys for this opportunity and to thank all of the professionals that helped us along the way, with a special thank you to our coaches and the rest of our team members that aren't here up on stage. Urban Makers North's proposal for Lafayette Square will ensure a financially and environmentally sustainable future. The adaptive reuse of all 3 existing buildings will create a diverse array of businesses that will create ample job opportunity and community building to this area of St. Paul. Lafayette Square is the most realistic, the highest, and the best use of the site. Thank you, and we are now open to your questions.
It was a very creative way to utilize the LOIs as a modeling tool. How reality-based or market researched were those LOIs?
So I personally know who signed the LOIs, and he is part of 2 different companies in partnerships. So that's how he actually owns part of Ladonia Brewery in St. Paul, and once he heard about the project, he was interested in helping out in some way. So what better way to have him sign our LOIs for really good beer? So we got him to sign for all 3 companies. He actually has a startup of a medical sterilization company, which is for Manny sterilization.
The LOIs, I'd like to ask, were also negotiated as if in a typical real client setting, of course with the understanding that this is a hypothetical situation, but we negotiated and rates were decided on realistic and what he wanted and market conditions at the time. So yeah.
How did you guys account for, in the future if for some reason, something falls through with one of the uses and it doesn't work for it? What assumptions did you guys make on the back end to refill that space?
Do you mean before construction or during construction?
Yeah, during construction or probably before construction.
Before construction? Yeah. I can take that too. So before construction, all of our construction is based off of our tenants. We're identifying that vacancy rates are a concern, so we want to make sure we solve that problem first before we enter construction. Then we would hopefully target a new use or a new tenant with similar, particularly in the industrial building. We identified a couple other companies that were also interested in this space. Manny Sterilization Company just had also stated the intention to buy the parcel after a set number of years. And so those were sort of our contingencies as we went along.
So we just talked a little bit about a downside scenario if there's a problem with one of the tenants. I would imagine that because you're preserving so many surface parking spots, you might have some future redevelopment potential as an upside. Did you think about that at all?
I can speak a little on that. Our initial look into this project was to include a much, I'd say, more comprehensive redevelopment of the site, which would include affordable housing, market rate housing, more uses like that. We decided that that's not feasible in today's market, but we do know that a site like this in such a central location in St. Paul, especially with St. Paul's 2040 comp plan, which is looking for more walkable mixed-use development, that a large parcel like ours will definitely be feasible for future mixed-use development. You want to add to that?
More specifically on parking, all of the allocated parking is based on St. Paul's most recent municipal code, but we also have a lot of extra parking spots after talking with our professionals that we would need a lot of spots for the warehouse employees, for example. So there's just like generally a lot of room for redevelopment over the years. So just wanted to touch on that as well.
On the note of the redevelopment, you guys are spending quite a bit of money to retrofit the industrial building to Manny Sterilization. How difficult would it be to move a different tenant if Manny's went under into that building? Is it very specific build out for that tenant, or kind of have you guys looked at that downside?
Ideally, we would like to sell it before we transfer.
Yeah, so when it comes to like different tenants, you could say Manny Sterilization is a very specific one. The code, when we were taking into account our other idea was like a medical office or surgery center, those codes are drastically different than anything else. So obviously we would have to switch it, convey to them what they need for the retrofit, and come up with the cost for the construction. So Manny Sterilization, very specific, but obviously we would need to adapt to their or what they need.
Also, we have signed, we made sure to sign 10-year initial leases for our uses with 2 subsequent 5-year renewal periods. So this is our initial lease that we have signed for all 3 of our buildings is longer than our expected hold period. So if a tenant breaks a lease, of course we have contingencies built in for that, but that's not our plan. We assume that we'll be able to retain ownership through our ownership, through the 7-year ownership period during this first initial lease term.
What kind of consideration did you take into for all the 3 uses as you were contemplating a sale? Because if you have a blanket cap rate of 6% on the whole thing, how did you bifurcate that between the different uses?
I mean, from conversations with experts and things and other people knowledgeable through market research, we decided we didn't spend as much time looking at specific rates of return for specific uses. We decided that there was a sort of standard market for what we were doing in terms of our commercial and industrial, as just looking at those 2. And we came up with just a general idea of what would be representative of our uses as a whole.
Given that your LOIs were negotiated, were the tenant improvements included in each meant to be all-inclusive, or are those tenants taking on some of their own burden?
So our LOIs included tenant improvements that we ideally would see as covering about 1/3 to maybe up to 1/2 of the specialized improvements of each tenant. Obviously, these tenants are, especially for our medical assembly plant, that's going to be a very specialized use, maybe interchangeable with a few other like industry comparables like Medtronic or something. But we're seeing it as they're the experts. We don't need our construction people to understand exactly what they need. So we will be, in our landlord construction period, be essentially delivering a blank slate building that will then be filled out by their specialized construction crews. Our LOIs are ideally funding about a third of their build out, and they're going to have additional fees that will come in for their own specialized contingencies, as I'm sure they'll run into issues that we will not be able to account for.
Test. Can everybody hear me? Well, thank you everybody for coming today. My name is Dennis Yando, and I'm here with my colleagues Riley and Ashley, and we are excited to present our idea for Lafayette Yards. So given just an overview of the property, it is located on 11.36 acres of land in St. Paul, Minnesota. Currently has 258,000 square feet of industrial space, 22,000 square feet of office, as well as approximately 175 parking spaces. Our goal for the development is to retain the 22,000 square feet of office space at about, and its 78 parking spaces, and develop a mixed-use site including 215 affordable housing units, 130,000 square feet of Class A industrial space, as well as approximately additional 155 parking spaces for 328 total. Our value proposition is a sustainable and diverse development to bring revitalization to the Lafayette Yards area. And it will all go in line with the comprehensive plan of 2024 for St. Paul. And our goal is to bring a much needed and early to market affordable units to the area. And this will utilize tax credits. So kind of going more into our total budget, it will be $103 million for our total budget. $54 million of that will come from low-income housing tax credits. We explored using TIF, but this area is actually not eligible for TIF based on some plans that we saw. And $43 million will come from a loan, $6 million of our own equity, and 85% of our total hard costs will be used towards building those affordable units. And overall, for a 10-year hold, it will produce returns of unlevered IRR and equity multiple, respectively, of 8.6% and 1.9, and levered returns of 23.5% and a 5 equity multiple. And then kind of looking into a more overview of our site, our property is located in northeast of St. Paul. It is very close to a lot of entertainment attractions in the area, like CHS Field, as well as the XL Energy Center, as well as divided by the highway from the downtown area, as well as the Capitol.
Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our start of our research to determine our highest and best use. We started by looking at different economic metrics. Firstly, we looked at the population growth rate, and the growth rate of 1.2% is what we used to underwrite 3% rent growth for our affordable housing units. The GDP growth was 8.7%, and we used that rate to justify our 4% rent growth for our industrial use. We also put a lot of focus on the employment growth in the area. So knowing that the employment has exceeded pre-pandemic levels, we felt comfortable with a 3% rent growth for the office, which was even further justified with the current stabilized unemployment rate of the area.
Awesome. Now we're going to get a little bit more specific into the submarket of St. Paul and our site itself. First, we wanted to look at some submarket indicators for multifamily, industrial, and office. I'll point out a few numbers specifically. You can look at the arrows for the rest. Looking at vacancy rate, industrial vacancy is going up. However, given our intended tenant mix and use of smaller tenants, we think that this risk will be avoided. Looking at new inventory, it's all going down. However, talking to people in the area, we found that demand is still relatively high for a lot of these, so we think that coming in with this space will be really useful. Rental rates are going up across the board, so that's really positive for our income outlook. And it's really important to acknowledge that cap rates are also going up in all sectors. However, with our conservative underwriting approach, we think we've mitigated this risk. Next, we looked at the people in the area. We looked at a 1, 3, and 5 mile radius around the site property. We looked at different metrics such as a median household income, population density, and population itself. These numbers kind of informed us that the income is lower than in the 1 mile than the 5 mile, and the population density is relatively low as well, which informed us with uses such as retail, it would not be a great choice as of now. Being close to downtown St. Paul, there's a ton of really important linkages, such as transportation of all modes, entertainment from sports to music, and of course, dining nearby and the variety of options in downtown St. Paul. We used this to inform us in our SWOT analysis. We found that the strengths of the property are its geographic location and its solar potential. Some of the weaknesses included property conditions and highway and industrial noise, which was a concern with our intended use. However, given the site plan that we developed, we think that the orientation and investment in value add has mitigated these risks. Next, we looked at opportunities. The regulatory changes from light industrial to mixed use is really important to diversify the income and risk of this property. And the labor force in the area is really good for industrial. Over 14.4% of the civilian labor force work in industrial-related industries. Next, we looked at threats. There are some nearby affordable housing places going up in the area right now, but after talking to some of those owners and other industry professionals, we've decided that our on-site amenities and green space are enough of a differentiator to make us competitive. And then lastly, and most importantly, the airport safety zone regulations, which are in place from the FAA, which is not flexible at all. They found that the use must not create a site population of more than 15 people per acre. And the way to mitigate this risk is by maintaining the allowed precedented use. Just to see where this affects us, it's just the southeastern portion of the property. We'll zoom in there, and as you can see, it's right where that current industrial building lays, so that's the only allowable use.
Now I'll go into some more specific of our development. So first, kind of to decide what we wanted to do with our site, we ran a highest and best use analysis. First, kind of looking at other options for hospitality, looking at hotel, condominiums, and senior housing. We saw that the demand metrics weren't as strong for these asset types, especially hotel, and we thought that those metrics, or those kind of property types would fare stronger in more downtown setting. And then looking at retail, as previously mentioned by Ashley, again, with the mile population being only 18,000, as well as the area not having the best visibility, we kind of thought that this wasn't the best uses either. Medical office, although it is very close to the local hospital and local pharmacies, after some discussions with some local professionals, they actually made it aware to us that the hospital is actually looking to downsize, so we again thought this wasn't the best use. And then market rate multifamily, we just kind of thought that affordable housing would fare much stronger here given the high demand. So kind of, again, looking into our three uses, for affordable housing, there is a huge shortage of affordable housing in the city, state, and country. And it also fares well with the comprehensive plan and also being able to use those tax credits to fund some of the project. So looking at industrial as well, as previously mentioned as well, the market is filled with a lot of industrial workers and employees, which makes it a strong market for industrial. And it also is, again, the only use that can be used within that portion of the site. And I'll get more into that later. And then office, we thought that it would fare well for the current building that is there with a little revitalization. It could be a good spot for some tenants. So kind of looking at our site plan, again, we have our industrial in the bottom right corner, which is again covered by that flight zone, which limits population density from 15 to 15 people per acre. Our office, which is currently in that site as well. And then our affordable housing on the opposite side of the site is the industrial to get rid of some of the sound complaints with that parking and green space in the middle as well, and also putting it in an optimal position for some of the solar panels that we have on top. Now getting into our timeline, our goal for this project was to really have a tenant in one of the buildings at all time. Kind of starting with that, we'll try to do the office renovations in the affordable housing construction right away, and then start with the industrial construction as the tenant that is in place now moves out. And we hope that have that all stabilized by the end of 2026. And again, kind of looking at our site, we'll have the industrial in the bottom right portion of the site where it can be with the existing use. The existing building that is there, we'll kind of revitalize that with some value add and make it a great office space for someone. And then again, our affordable housing, which will be a prime location for those living there.
Now I'm just going to dive in a little bit deeper to each of our uses and talk about how we arrived at the assumptions we did. We started by looking at comps in the market, primarily downtown, a little bit more to the west. With these comps, we try to find some that matched the year built, the square footage, units, unit types. So we really relied on comps to make assumptions for our affordable housing rent. And then with office, in addition to the comps, we also talked to professionals in the area that understood the site well, so they could help us narrow down a rent that made more sense. With multifamily, it's going to be a 5-story building with 215 units with studio, 1-bed, 2-bed, and 3-bed options, with the majority of them being 2-bed. The amenities that we have, those were based on another project going up across the street, very similar. We wanted to stay competitive. The occupancy that we have set for stabilized time is 95%, and the yearly rent growth will be 3%. The average lease term is 12 months, and we expect to have lease up 4 months after construction at the latest. For industrial, we have a smaller scale industrial to target smaller businesses within the St. Paul area. We decided on 4 smaller bays, 3 30,000 square foot bays, and then 1 40,000 square foot. And then for occupancy on that, we have it also at 95% with 4% rent growth and recovery growth. And we have 10-year lease periods, so that will take up the entire time of our hold period. And then looking finally at office, we are going to keep the office as is, except for the value add that we plan on doing, which will be about $200,000 to update both the ceiling and the flooring in the unit, and then keep it at 2 suites. Occupancy for office is slightly less, just based on current economic market trends. Rent growth and recovery growth are both at 3%. And then we assumed 5-year terms with 5-month lease-up periods in between. After our 10-year hold, we expect to have a stabilized NOI growth of 3.4% a year. And then we have our individual cap rates up there, 7% for multifamily, 9% for industrial, and then 10.5% for office. And based off those cap rates, we came to a valuation of just over $60 million.
Now we'll wrap up with some risk mitigation analysis. Looking at our first year, our primary concern was construction fluctuation. In order to combat this, we have a 5% contingency as well as a conservative timeline where we always have consistent operating income. Next, for our operating period, we looked at NOI volatility, and given our vacancy and rent growth rates that we also consider to be conservative and the linkages that are unique to the site, we think this risk has been mitigated. And lastly, looking at reversion, we were concerned with cap rate expansion, as discussed throughout the presentation. However, given our conservative underwriting, we currently have a 50 basis points bump over our hold period, and we have an outstanding loan balance payoff with a 6% growth over the hold period. So we think this risk has been mitigated as well. We would like to acknowledge all of the professionals that have given us their time and experience for this. We couldn't have done this without you. We'd like to thank all of the NAIOP professionals and judges for their time. We appreciate the opportunity, and we'd like to open it up for questions.
Thank you, guys. The industrial piece of your proposal sits where the current industrial building is today. Can you talk about what elements of the existing building you guys discovered that made you conclude that it's better to tear it all down and rebuild a new industrial building in half of its footprint? Just walk us through your thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So we discovered that the roof would have to be replaced in the coming years. So based on that cost, we thought it would be better to just redevelop it, make it Class A. And then we also noticed that the clear height as well as the truck court weren't at kind of industry standards. So we thought if we made those changes, it would really help us with our rents.
Is that industrial building, it appears from the aerial or the rendering that it's a rear-loaded building, so the entrance from the rear or from the front?
Sorry, say that.
On your rendering, the building is built, similar to how the current building is, but is there access in the front, given that the office building is, right in front of it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, there should be access on the back side of it. You may not be able to see it from that visual, but kind of the facade that's facing towards the multifamily, there should be an entrance there. And we kind of put the truck bays on the side that you saw in the visual, kind of allowing for more mobility for the semi-trucks coming in that courtyard.
You had quite a spread between your unleveraged and leveraged returns. Can you discuss a little bit about how you got there with your capital stack?
Yeah, for sure. The spread is definitely due to our tax credits that we utilize. Just based on how much we use, that's kind of what's bringing about that larger spread.
As you know, getting tax credits there's a limited pot to go and get them. Can you walk through how you guys thought this project would compete with all the other people trying to get LIHTC credits and kind of how you came to the conclusion then to do affordable?
Yeah, so we reached out to affordable housing professionals in the area. They sent us information, including wait list and current projects that are on that. So we were able to compare our project to other people's projects, and we talked to the people across the street about different things. So we believe that our affordable housing project is very competitive.
The flight plan graphic that you guys brought up was kind of interesting, that you can't have, more than 15 people per acre. Did you guys contemplate, any, I think you said in your presentation that, the FHA is very non-moving entity that is probably not willing to change that, but did you guys research any variances to that in consideration of developing the site?
Yeah, so when we noticed this in the 2040 comprehensive plan, this map, we did look into it, and there are some buildings that do break the 15 person per acre rule. However, all of these buildings existed in those precedented uses before the construction of the downtown St. Paul airport. So that's kind of the rule to it all. So that's why, like, if there's an office building or apartment building there, it was there beforehand, so they weren't able to, like, tear it down.
Well, hey, you guys get me when the judges deliberate, and we'll see when they come back. Once again, congratulations to all of the teams that participated in this year's competition. We greatly enjoyed hearing your creative ideas for this site. The judges had a very challenging task evaluating these great proposals, and after tallying up the scores from both the written proposals and today's presentations, here are the results.
All right. The third place team and recipient of the $1,000 grant from the Opus Foundation is Marquette University for their McNeely Plaza project. Nice job, Marquette.
All right. And taking second place and recipient of a $2,500 grant from the Opus Foundation is the University of Minnesota for their Lafayette Square project. Kind of line up where they'll come up with the check. Here, if you guys see it. Yeah. Yep.
Well, it's not really a surprise anymore, but the winner of the 2024 University Challenge and recipient of a $5,000 grant from the Opus Foundation is University of Wisconsin-Madison for their Lafayette Yard project.
All right, once again, congrats to all the teams. All the teams' proposals will be posted on the NAIOP website for your viewing if you should like to. These also include the names and resumes of each student participant. Thank you again for attending this afternoon and supporting NAIOP. We'd invite you to stick around for happy hour and please network with the students. I'm sure some of them are still looking for their next career opportunity. All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone.